Now she can finally look like she belongs at this table. Rourke Hale, 38-year-old husband of Willa Hale, said it in front of everyone. Not quietly, not as a throwaway remark. He said it clearly, toward the center of the Meridian Grand Ballroom, with the chandelier burning above a room full of charity donors and old family friends and people who had watched Willa smile through years of being measured and found modest. Willa Hale, 35-year-old wife of Rourke, stood 2 feet from him and held the presentation box he had just handed her. Inside, on a bed of cream satin, lay a watch. Long case, steel links, a dial that caught the overhead light and threw it back in every direction. Rourke had called it an Aurican Veil. He had told the room it was one of the most exclusive timepieces in the world. He had said she deserved something real for once. Hugo Hale, 66-year-old father of Rourke, began clapping from the second row. Beside Rourke stood Celine Ashworth, 30, an investment consultant whose name Willa had first encountered on a hotel receipt that Rourke had not known she'd seen. Celine held a champagne flute near her chin and watched Willa with the calm of a woman who had already decided how the evening would close. Willa opened the box more fully and looked at the watch. She did not flip it over. She did not ask for a loop. She had spent 12 years building Aurican Veil, from a rented workshed in western Pennsylvania into a house that dressed the wrists of senators, collectors and families who treated time as the only honest inheritance. She knew the exact weight of the crown. She knew the depth of the caseback engraving. She knew the temperature of the sapphire crystal under overhead chandelier light, cooler and sharper than any substitute her craftspeople had ever allowed to leave the building. This was not their work. Rourke spoke again. He raised his glass and let his voice carry the way men do when they have rehearsed being wounded. I think everyone here knows that Willa and I have been going in different directions for a long time, he said. I owe it to her, and to myself, to stop pretending. I'm asking for a separation. The room did not gasp. It went still in the way that rooms go still when something real has just been said inside a space that was pretending to be ceremonial. Hugo watched from his seat with an expression that looked like grief, but was closer to vindication. Celine's champagne glass didn't move. No one spoke. A few guests looked at the table in front of them. One woman near the windows quietly folded her napkin. Willa held the presentation box and looked at the watch and thought about her mother. Elsa, who had worked in a 2-room shop above a plumbing supply store in Latrobe, Pennsylvania, servicing the watches of coal miners and school teachers and weekend farmers who drove 40 minutes because she was the only one who could be trusted to open the back of something small and valuable without ruining it. Elsa, who had died in February of the year that Aurican Veil received its first international press, and who had never seen what her daughter built from the skills she had taught her and the patience she had modeled. Elsa had said once, "A fake only fools the person who never learned to sit still with something real." Willa lifted her eyes. "Before I respond," she said, and her voice was level, "I'd like the watch authenticated." Rourke laughed, short for the room's benefit. "If that helps you accept it." Hugo shook his head slowly. "Let her have her ceremony." From the far side of the ballroom, near the charity auction display, a man in a dark jacket stood and buttoned his coat. Aldwin Pierce, 58, senior authentication specialist for Aurican Veil, had been present all evening as the on-site valuator for 3 antique pieces donated to the night's sale. No one had questioned his being there. No one had needed to. "If Mrs. Hale permits," Aldwin said, "I can conduct an examination now." Celine's champagne glass came down from her chin for the first time all evening. Rourke gestured with an open palm. "Easy, generous, be my guest." Willa set the box on the nearest table. Aldwin placed a small leather case beside it, drew on white examination gloves and began. 3 weeks before the gala, Willa had been at her desk in the authentication wing of Aurican Veil's Philadelphia headquarters, when Cleo Nash, 41, her director of operations and the person who had been with her since the company employed fewer than 15 people, placed a single sheet of paper in front of her. "Came through the household account," Cleo said. "Your house manager flagged it. It went under Mr. Hale's card, but the vendor doesn't match his usual suppliers." The receipt was from a company called Brandthorne Private Sales. The item description read, "Aurican Veil-style gentleman's timepiece, estate provenance, authentication certificate included." Style, not authentic, not verified style. Willa read it twice, set it down, turned it face over. "Don't contact them," she said. "Don't reach out to Rourke. Get me Aldwin, and get me Mirabelle." She had already known something was shifting before the receipt arrived. She had known it the way you know weather before any instrument confirms it. In the quality of the air, in the texture of ordinary moments that had gone slightly wrong. The phone left face down on the kitchen counter. The hotel charge he explained as a client dinner from a property that hosted private suites, not dinners. The way he had stopped asking anything about her work, not with hostility, but with the complete absence of curiosity, as if he had already categorized her life as not worth the question. And then the white peonies on the entryway table when she came home early from New York. He had said market flowers. The ribbon around the stems was from Serafino Floral, a delivery service for events and private clients, not a market stall. She had said nothing. She had gone upstairs and sat in the dark and made herself acknowledge what she had been filing away for months. The next morning she called Mirabelle Cross, 47, her attorney and the person who had handled Oregon Vale's legal architecture since before anyone outside Pennsylvania had heard of the company. Mirabelle listened without interrupting, then said, "Don't search his devices. Don't confront him. If there's more, we find it correctly." There was more. The investigator Mirabelle retained had documented Rourke and Celine Ashworth at the Hayworth Hotel on 4 separate evenings. Public corridors only, time-stamped, no audio. Willa had watched the footage alone in her office at 11 at night, with the city outside quiet and the lamp over her drafting table the only thing burning. She had pressed her hands flat against the desk until the room stopped tilting. She called Mirabelle. "How long?" Mirabelle asked. "At least 6 months," Willa said. "Probably more. The Meridian Gala is in 3 weeks." "I know. Do you want to cancel?" Willa looked at the invitation still propped on the corner of her desk. Rourke had insisted on hosting. "A charity properly done," he'd said, "something that finally fit the life we should be building." She had let herself believe for a few weeks that it meant he was trying. She understood now that the event was not for her. "No," she told Mirabelle. "If he wants an audience, let him have one. Place Aldwin at the auction table. You'll be there too." Aldwin had responded to the receipt within hours. Branthorne has appeared in 3 counterfeit-adjacent reviews in 5 years. They mask replicas as estate pieces to limit liability. The certificate language matches a format Oregon Vale retired in 2019. More concerning, similar certificates have appeared in external verification submissions tied to a business entity connected to the Hale family name. Willa had read that last sentence 3 times. She already knew what she had been doing without ever having thought of it as anything significant. For 4 years, a raw materials supplier connected to Hugo's holding company had been receiving favorable contract terms through one of Oregon Vale's vendor partners. A relationship Willa had arranged quietly, without telling Rourke, without telling Hugo, without asking for a single acknowledgement from anyone on that side. It was a proper business arrangement with contracts and margins and legal review. But it gave Hugo's supply chain a stability it would not otherwise have had. Hugo didn't know where it came from. Rourke didn't know it existed. Willa had not wanted credit. She had believed perhaps too long that protecting the people her husband loved was something a marriage asked of you, even when those people did not deserve it. Now she looked at the receipt and at Aldwin's message and understood that Hugo may have been using forged versions of her own company's certificates to inflate assets he didn't have, while she was quietly keeping his suppliers alive. She thought of what her mother had said. A fake only fools the person who never learned to sit still with something real. She picked up the phone and called Mirabelle. "Open a discreet review on Branthorne. No contact with Rourke, no warning to Hugo. Keep Cleo copied on everything." In the ballroom, Aldwin worked without rushing. He lifted the watch from the satin with 2 gloved fingers. He checked the crown. He used a loupe to trace the caseback engraving. He turned the watch twice under a light pen, examining the crystal angle and the finish of the dial. Then he unfolded the authentication certificate from beneath the velvet and set it beside his tablet screen. The music had stopped. The waiters stood near the walls, with their trays lowered. Hugo was watching, Rourke was watching, Celine was watching her own hands. Aldwin looked up. "My preliminary determination is that this timepiece was not produced by Oregon Vale." The sentence landed without drama, which made it land harder. "The movement is a high-grade replica, but the caseback engraving deviates from our standard in 3 specific points. The crown threading is incorrect. The crystal is not sapphire. The serial number on this certificate does exist in our registry. It belongs to a commissioned pocket watch from 2014, not a wristwatch. The certificate itself uses an authentication format we retired 7 years ago." Rourke's expression had gone from easy to careful to something harder to name. "The dealer made a mistake," he said. "I was given wrong information." "That may be," Aldwin said. He did not inflect it as agreement. Hugo stepped forward. "And who authorized you to speak for Oregon Vale in this room?" I am the senior authentication specialist for Vale, Aldwin said. The room shifted. Men who had been nodding along with Hugo's dinner table speeches all evening became quietly still. Hugo had spent 8 years name-dropping Vale at every important table he could reach. He had called it the standard by which serious people measured serious things. Now one of its specialists had just told the room that his son's gift was a copy. Aldwin looked again at the certificate. He turned it twice, rubbed the edge of the paper between 2 gloved fingers. His expression changed, not shock but recognition, the particular look of someone finding a pattern they have seen before. The format of this document has appeared in other contexts unrelated to this evening, he said, specifically in asset verification submissions connected to a business entity under the Hale family name. Hugo's hand, which had been lifting his wineglass, stopped in midair. Rourke turned fully toward Aldwin. The color had left his face. Mirabelle Cross stepped away from the auction table and crossed the room with her folder under her arm. Mr. Hale, she said to Rourke then, Mr. Hale Sr. to Hugo, all communication regarding separation, assets, or any matter arising from tonight will proceed through Mrs. Hale's counsel. Rourke stared at her. Counsel. Hers, Mirabelle said. The boardroom at Vale's Philadelphia headquarters was on the 14th floor, with the city spread quiet and winter cold below the east windows. Hugo Hale had expected a meeting with senior executives. He had not expected what he found. Mirabelle, folder open. Aldwin with a sealed evidence case. Garrison Webb, 52, a forensic accountant, laptop open to a column of figures that looked very deliberate. A representative from First Commerce's commercial lending division sitting stiffly with a sealed envelope in front of him, and one empty chair at the head of the long table, which no one had taken. Hugo and Rourke sat down. Celine had not come. She had stopped returning messages the night before. The elevator opened. Willa walked in. Grey wool blazer, her mother's watch on her wrist. The original, the one Elsa had assembled by hand in Latrobe, a simple brushed case and a swept second hand worn every day of Willa's adult life. Cleo Nash followed 2 steps behind with a tablet pressed to her side. Hugo turned toward the door and looked past Willa, waiting. No one more important entered. Mirabelle spoke. Willa Elsa Hale, known professionally as Willa Brennick, is the founder and majority shareholder of Vale, controlling 63% of shares through a private holding structure. She has operated the company under that structure since its founding 12 years ago. The room absorbed the sentence. Rourke looked at Willa, then at the table, then at Willa again, as if the distance between the woman he had been married to and the name he had heard at every serious dinner he'd ever attended could not be physically calculated. Hugo stared at her with the expression of a man who has just found, at the bottom of something he believed he understood, something he cannot yet make himself believe. Willa took the chair at the head of the table. She thought of every Hale family dinner, Hugo lifting a glass. Vale. That's what real craftsmanship looks like. That's the standard serious people hold themselves to. He had said it while glancing at her plain blazer and her unassuming watch, with the small, certain smile of a man who had placed her in a category before she finished a sentence. He had spent years trying to arrange a personal introduction to Vale's founder through business contacts and mutual acquaintances. He had never thought to ask the woman across from him at his own Thanksgiving table. You used the company's name, Willa said. Hugo's jaw moved but produced nothing. Garrison turned his laptop toward the table. Hale Family Holdings submitted 3 Vale certificates as collateral documentation in support of a commercial credit line. Claimed valuation, approximately $470,000 in authenticated timepieces. Vale has no record of issuing authentication for those pieces. All 3 certificates used the same retired format identified in the ballroom last night. The First Commerce representative set the envelope on the table. Mr. Hale, the bank has formally suspended your credit line pending a complete collateral review. Hugo looked at Rourke. Rourke was already looking somewhere past the window. Willa continued. There is one additional matter. For 4 years, a supplier network connected to Hale Family Holdings received favorable contract terms through one of Vale's materials vendors, a relationship I arranged without publicizing it. Rourke didn't know. You didn't know. She paused. As of last week, that arrangement has been suspended pending the outcome of this review. Hugo's eyes came back to her fully. He understood what she was saying. Not the clause, but the shape beneath it. The floor that had felt like solid ground had been resting on something he never noticed. He understood this the way men understand things when it is too late for understanding to change anything. Rourke's voice came out quiet. Why didn't you tell me any of it? Willa looked at him. The pain was there in her face. She did not try to remove it. "I almost did," she said, "more than once. But you told me once that powerful women made their husbands look small. You smiled when your father said I wasn't exactly built for serious rooms. So I stayed quiet. I wanted to know whether you could love me without knowing what I had built." Rourke was still. "You didn't leave because you misunderstood me," Willa said. "You left because you had already decided what I was worth. You made that decision in 100 small moments before the ballroom. Every time your father dismissed me and you looked away. Every time you made a comment that told me you wanted a quiet woman, not a whole one." She stood. "Yarrick and Vale will cooperate fully with the bank review, the insurance inquiry, and any fraud investigation arising from the collateral documents." She looked at Mirabelle. "Send the separation agreement this afternoon." She walked out of the room. What followed did not happen loudly. That was what surprised people who were close enough to watch. Hugo Hale's credit line did not survive the review. The 3 forged certificates had backed nearly $500,000 in claimed assets. 2 additional lenders began parallel inquiries as the pattern became visible. A name that had moved through Philadelphia business circles for 3 decades started appearing in different sentences: under review, suspended, pending investigation. Hugo had spent years chasing an introduction to Auric and Vale's leadership. He had not understood until too late that every door he had been knocking on had been held by the same woman he had dismissed over dinner. Rourke moved into a rental apartment across the city. Connections he had spent a decade cultivating went quiet in the way. Connections go quiet when status stops being reliable. He had chosen Celine and his father's approval over a woman who had been quietly holding the floor beneath his family's feet. When she withdrew, he finally felt the weight of what had been resting there. Celine Ashworth's name appeared in the investigator's legal filing, tied to the Branthorne vendor trail and the counterfeits procurement chain. She had wanted the life she believed existed behind Willa's marriage. She had not understood that life had never been Rourke's to offer. Brand partnerships she had built over 5 years went quiet in succession. The photograph from the ballroom, her chin down, the particular smile of a woman who thought she had won, followed her everywhere. She had wanted to step into Willa's place. She had never understood how large that place actually was. Willa gave no interviews. She made no posts. She let the legal process run, and the truth do what truth does when it is documented correctly and no one interferes. She did not dismantle anything with anger. She simply withdrew the parts of herself that had been holding things upright and let what was never solid fall. 6 weeks after the Meridian Gala, Rourke came to Auric and Vale headquarters unannounced. He stood on the sidewalk in a November rain, looking up at the building's facade with the expression of a man who is calculating something that cannot be calculated. Willa saw him from the lobby. She walked outside. Mirabelle appeared at her shoulder. Willa shook her head. "Just a minute," and Mirabelle stepped back. Rourke looked at her. The coat was still good. The watch was still expensive, but the ease that had lived in his body for as long as she had known him was entirely gone. "I didn't know," he said. "I never knew you were all of this." "I know," she said. "If I had known, you would have treated me differently," she said. "That is the part that should stay with you." The rain ran steadily off the edge of the awning. "I loved you," he said. "You loved the version of me that didn't ask anything back," Willa said. "You loved me quiet and small and useful. When you thought I had nothing, you made sure everyone could watch you say so." She kept her voice even. "A mistake is forgetting something that matters. What you planned for the Meridian was a choice." She held out the envelope Mirabelle had prepared, the final separation agreement, signed on her side, waiting for his. Rourke took it with wet hands. "I'm sorry," he said. Willa looked at him one last time. She thought of the winter, early in their marriage, when he had driven 3 hours through ice to be beside her while she cleared out her mother's shop. He had carried boxes without complaining. He had held her hand in the parking lot outside the storage facility and said he didn't understand yet why these things mattered so much to her, but that he wanted to learn. She had loved that man. She had held on to the image of that man long after the original was gone. "So am I," she said, "but I'm not going back." She went inside. The Elsa collection launched on a Thursday evening in late February in the Auric and Vale workshop itself. Not a hotel ballroom, not a gallery, but the actual space where the work was made. The benches were worn smooth at the edges. The air held the particular quiet of a place where people paid close attention to small things. Display cases had been placed along the work tables, and the lighting was warm and exact. At the center of the room stood the first piece from the collection, a round face watch, hand-assembled movement, brushed steel case, leather strap in the same warm brown as the bench where Elsa had taught her daughter to hold something small under a lamp and listen for what it was telling her. Beside it, in its own small case, was a photograph. Elsa, at her workbench, 1988, a loop in her hand, and on her face the patience of a woman who understood that rushing something never made it more real. Cleo came to Willa's side near the back of the room. First 16 pieces are spoken for. Mirabelle stood a few feet away. The fund is formally registered. Applications open next week. Part of every sale from the Elsa collection would support legal resources for women navigating financial manipulation, forged documentation, and public humiliation following betrayal. The cases where evidence existed but power didn't, where the truth was visible but unreadable without the right tools and the right people standing beside you when the room went silent. Willa looked at the photograph of her mother. Elsa had worked in small rooms her whole life and had never seen the thing she started become what it became. She had died not knowing that the patience she taught by example, the patience to sit with something and feel what it actually was, to refuse to be fooled by shine, would become the foundation of an empire named in her memory. Willa had hidden that empire for 8 years, not out of shame, out of the belief that love given freely, without the weight of what she owned, was the only kind worth having. She understood now that hiding had been its own kind of answer. The right person would not have needed her to be less. She touched the edge of the photograph, through the glass. The room was warm and full of people who were there to see something real. Willa had spent years making herself smaller in spaces that should have held her whole. She would not do that again. Not for comfort, not for approval, not for anyone who needed her diminished in order to feel large. She turned back to face the evening. Some women are not broken when the betrayal finally ends. Some women simply quietly stop being invisible.